Did you know that on Ohio's rural roads, there's a fatal accident almost every week, many of them involving trucks on dark, desolate stretches where help is miles away? In fact, Ohio ranks among the top 10 states for trucker fatalities on back roads. And it's not just accidents you have to watch out for. There's something else. Something lurking. My name is Gideon Massie. I've been a truck driver for over 20 years, and I thought I'd seen it all. But nothing could have prepared me for what I encountered on a frigid November night back in 2015. If you're a trucker, or even just someone who spent long hours on the road, this story might make you think twice before picking up a hitchhiker in the dead of night. Before we dive into the heart of the story, make sure to subscribe to the channel if you love spine-chilling tales of horror, aliens, and the supernatural. Hit the bell icon so you'll never miss an upload, and don't forget to share your own strange encounters in the comments below. We'd love to hear your stories. I remember every detail of that night. It was November 12, 2015. A date etched in my mind as clearly as the frost forming on the windows. I'd been driving through Ohio, crossing the endless back roads of Route 62, a place where the shadows stretch far and wide, and the towns are small and scattered. It was the kind of quiet that made the whole world feel like it had come to a standstill. The air was bone cold, even with the truck's heater running full blast. After hours on the road, I finally spotted a diner that looked like it had been there since the 50s. Its flickering neon sign the only beacon of light on that isolated stretch of highway. I pulled in, hoping to grab a coffee and stretch my legs before the long night ahead. Inside, the place was as worn as its sign, with faded booths and a jukebox that probably hadn't worked in decades. Sitting a few seats down from me was another trucker, his cap pulled low over his face. He looked like he hadn't slept in days, his eyes bloodshot and filled with something uneasy. As we exchanged stories, he gave me a strange warning before he left, something that still gives me chills. Be careful out there, man. There's some bad stuff on these roads. I brushed it off as just another trucker's superstition. After all, the open road has a way of getting to people. It messes with your mind, especially on long nights when the only company you have is the hum of the engine and the occasional crackle on the radio. The sun had long since disappeared, leaving only a pale sliver of moonlight as I made my way back onto the highway. I'd driven another 30 miles or so when I spotted her. A lone figure by the side of the road, waving her arms. She looked barely dressed for the cold night, only a thin sweater and jeans, her face pale under the moonlight. Now, if you've ever driven long stretches at night, you'll know that seeing someone out there on an empty road is a rare sight. It almost doesn't feel real, like you're seeing a ghost. I rolled down my window, asking if she needed a ride. She looked terrified, glancing around as if something was coming for her. Her voice was a faint whisper, almost lost in the cold wind. Can you take me to the next town? My car. It broke down and I have no phone. Against my better judgment, I motioned for her to get in, telling myself that no one should be left alone out here. She climbed into the cab, settling in the passenger seat without a word. I tried to break the silence, asking her name and where she was headed, but she just stared straight ahead, her hands clenched in her lap. We drove in eerie silence for miles. The road stretched endlessly in front of us, and all I could hear was the hum of the engine and the faint tapping of her fingers against her knee. Every so often, I'd glance at her, but she never looked back, just kept staring ahead, like she was in a trance. The quiet grew heavier, filling the cab like a weight pressing down on my chest. Eventually, we reached a small gas station, the only speck of light in miles of darkness. I pulled in, relieved to have a moment away from the chilling silence that seemed to seep from my passenger. Here we are, I said, trying to sound upbeat. I nudged her gently, and she finally looked at me, her face so pale it was almost ghostly. Thank you, she whispered, stepping out of the truck and disappearing into the dimly lit gas station. I waited, watching the door. Minutes passed, and there was still no sign of her. Growing impatient, I went inside to look for her, thinking maybe she'd gotten lost. But the place was empty, aside from an old man behind the counter. Did a woman come in here just now? I asked, feeling a strange chill creeping up my spine. He gave me a confused look, shaking his head slowly. "Son, you're the only one I've seen in here all night." My heart skipped a beat. I walked back to the truck, half expecting to see her sitting in the passenger seat, but it was empty. The only trace of her presence was a folded piece of paper, wedged between the seat and the door. With trembling hands, I opened it. The words were scrawled in shaky handwriting, "Don't look back." Now, I've heard of ghost stories on the road, but this felt different. Something about that note felt like a warning, a desperate plea from beyond. I tried to brush off the unease gnawing at me. Surely, it was just a prank, a trick my mind was playing after a long night on the road. I crumpled the note in my fist, stuffed it into my pocket, and started up the engine, hoping the steady rumble of the truck would drown out whatever strange thoughts were creeping in. But even as I rolled back onto the empty road, the unease clung to me like a shadow, a cold grip tightening around my spine. With each mile I drove, the night seemed to grow darker, pressing in on my headlights as if trying to swallow them whole. The endless stretch of road ahead was a winding ribbon of pitch-black asphalt, flanked by fields of frozen earth that seemed to go on forever. The sky above was a deep, inky black, with only the occasional starlight breaking through the thick veil of clouds. In the silence, I could swear I felt something, a presence in the cab, like a pair of eyes watching me from just beyond the reach of my headlights. I kept glancing in the rearview mirror, half expecting to catch a glimpse of her. A flash of pale skin, a pair of wide, unblinking eyes staring back at me from the shadows of the cab. But there was nothing, just my own reflection staring back, looking more haggard and tired with every glance. Yet the feeling didn't fade. If anything, it grew stronger, filling the cab with a bone-deep chill that seeped into my skin. The air was thick and heavy, laced with the faintest hint of something rotten, something old, like the smell of damp earth disturbed after decades of silence. The gusts of wind outside seemed to carry whispers, faint voices that rose and fell with the rhythm of the road, murmuring words I couldn't quite make out. I gripped the wheel tighter, pushing the truck faster, as if I could outrun whatever was clinging to me. The shadows on the road twisted and stretched like long, skeletal fingers reaching for the truck, clawing at the sides as if trying to pull me off the road and into the darkness beyond. At one point, I was sure I saw her in the road ahead, a pale figure standing in the headlights, eyes wide and unblinking, her mouth open in a silent scream. My heart seized, and I slammed on the brakes, skidding to a halt. But when I blinked, she was gone, leaving only an empty stretch of road and the soft rustle of the wind against the cab. I swallowed hard, the taste of fear sharp in my throat, and forced myself to keep going. I had to get out of there, had to put as much distance as possible between myself and whatever was haunting that stretch of road. Every second felt like an eternity, and the further I drove, the more I felt her presence, an unrelenting weight pressing down on me, as if something was clinging to my very soul. Finally, I reached my destination, a lonely depot on the outskirts of town. The lights were dim, flickering, casting long shadows that danced across the empty yard. I jumped out of the cab and unloaded the haul as fast as I could, my hands shaking, my heart still racing with the memory of her ghostly figure. But as I climbed back into the truck, I froze. There, tucked neatly under the passenger seat, was another piece of paper. My hands trembled as I unfolded it, the words scrawled in that same shaky, haunting handwriting. "Be careful, I'm still watching." My throat tightened, and a cold shiver ran down my spine. There was no way anyone could have slipped into the truck while I was unloading. The depot was empty, silent as the grave, with not a soul in sight. And yet, someone or something had left that note, a reminder that I hadn't escaped her, that she was still with me, lingering in the shadows, watching, waiting. Since that night, every trip I take through those lonely back roads feels different. I can't shake the feeling that I'm never alone, that she's still there, lurking in the shadows, her presence an icy weight pressing down on me. Sometimes, when the road is empty and the night is quiet, I'll catch glimpses of her in the rearview mirror. Just a flash, a pale face with wide, hollow eyes staring back at me before disappearing into the darkness. The shadows on the road seem darker now, stretching farther, as if reaching for the truck, waiting for a moment of weakness, a moment when they can drag me back to that haunted stretch of Route 62. The wind carries whispers that seem to call my name, faint voices that drift in and out of the night, echoing with an urgency I can't ignore. Every mile feels like a journey into the unknown, a venture into a darkness that's deeper than anything I've ever known. It's as if she's waiting, searching for something, or maybe for someone, a restless soul bound to the road, seeking a ride that will never bring her peace. I don't know what she wants, why she chose me, or what keeps her bound to those lonely stretches of road. But I know one thing for certain. She's still out there, watching, waiting, and one day, I might see her again, standing by the side of the road, her pale face illuminated by the headlights, her empty eyes staring back at me. If you've ever had an encounter on the road you can't explain, we'd love to hear your story in the comments below. These highways hold more than just memories and milestones. Sometimes, they hold secrets that defy explanation, shadows that never fade. And if you enjoyed this tale, be sure to subscribe to our channel for more stories of the strange, the supernatural, and the unknown. Until next time, remember, when you're driving down Ohio's back roads, be careful who you let in, because sometimes they may never leave.